There are places in this country where the soil remembers things it shouldn't, where the shadows under the pines are older and hungrier than anywhere else. The town of Silvertarn, nestled in the deep woods of the Pacific Northwest, is one of those places. If you want to hear the whole terrifying truth of it, make sure you're subscribed, and don't forget to hit that like button. Story 1. The Lure of the Hollow. It wasn't the sound of my brother's scream that haunts me the most. It was the silence that followed. A silence so complete, so heavy, it felt like the forest itself was holding its breath. One moment, Leo was whooping with joy, a 20-yard lead on me as we raced back to our campsite. The next, that scream, not of pain, but of pure, unadulterated terror, ripped through the twilight, and then nothing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand, you need to know about Silvertarn. Our family had been coming to this little town in Washington state for a decade, ever since our dad decided we were becoming soft city kids. It was his paradise. A postcard-perfect little community of about 500 souls. Built on the shores of a lake so clear and still it acted like a mirror for the endless ranks of Douglas firs and ancient cedars that surrounded it. The air always smelled of pine needles and wood smoke. People waved from their porches. Old Man Henderson at the general store would still give you a root beer barrel candy if you listened to one of his long, rambling stories about logging in the 60s. It was the kind of place that made you believe in the simple, good things in life. Leo and I, twins at 16, saw it a little differently. For us, it was boring. No cell service, no decent Wi-Fi, just trees, water, and more trees. Our annual 2-week summer trip was a sentence to be served. That last day, we'd been fishing out on the lake without a single bite and decided to pack it in early. A storm was brewing over the mountains, and the light had taken on that weird greenish gold quality it gets before all hell breaks loose. We'd taken the long way back, a trail that cut through a part of the woods we called the Hollow, because the way the land dipped down there made everything feel hushed and separate. We were running because the first fat drops of rain had started to fall, and because we were 16 and running for no reason is what you do. Leo, ever the competitor, shot ahead, his red jacket a bright slash against all the green and brown. I remember seeing him glance off to the side of the trail, a quick look, and he actually slowed down for a second. I thought he'd seen a deer. "Hey Sam, you hear that?" He'd called back, his voice curious. "Hear what?" I yelled, my own breath starting to burn in my lungs. "It's just the wind, man, come on." But he wasn't listening. He'd stopped completely, his head cocked. "No, it sounds like music." That's when the scream came. It was ripped from him. I saw him lurch forward, not like he was running, but like he was yanked, disappearing into the thick undergrowth between two massive, gnarled old cedars. I sprinted to the spot, my heart hammering against my ribs, calling his name. I burst into a small, unnaturally circular clearing. Empty. The rain began to fall in earnest, a sudden downpour that hammered on the leaves and drowned out all other sound. "Leo!" I screamed. Nothing. That's when the silence descended. The rain was there, but it felt muted, distant. The forest was watching. I felt it. A primal part of my brain, something older than reason, was screaming at me to run. But it was my brother. I pushed through a wall of ferns and saw it. A single, small object lying in the moss. Leo's Swiss Army knife, the one our dad gave him. It was clutched in the hand of a figure standing perfectly still behind a tree. My breath caught. It was a woman. Her back was to me, but I could see she wore a dress of simple gray wool, and her hair was long and the color of wheat. She was so utterly still she seemed a part of the forest itself. Relief, stupid and overwhelming, washed over me. She'd seen him. She could help. "Miss," I said, my voice trembling. "My brother, did you see which way he went?" Slowly, so slowly, she began to turn. The hope curdled in my stomach, replaced by a cold dread I cannot explain. There was something wrong with the way she moved, something unnaturally fluid. She turned and I saw her face. It was beautiful, heart-stoppingly, impossibly beautiful. High cheekbones, full lips, eyes the color of a summer sky. But it was a beauty that was cold and alien. like looking at a perfect statue. And just behind her, mostly hidden by her skirts, I saw it, a long, brown, hairy tail, like that of a cow swishing slowly through the wet grass. She smiled, and it didn't touch her eyes. She raised a finger, pale and slender, and pointed deeper into the woods, towards the darkest, oldest part of the forest. Her voice when she spoke was like honey and bells and whispering leaves. It promised safety, warmth, and answers to every question I'd ever had. "He went that way," she said. "Come, I will show you." Every instinct told me not to. Every cell in my body was recoiling. But that voice, it wrapped around my mind, smothering my fear, my logic, my very will. I took a step forward, then another. The world narrowed to her smile and her pointing finger. I was going to follow her. I was going to walk right into the dark with her. A crack of thunder, so loud it shook the ground, exploded directly overhead. The spell shattered. I stumbled back, gasping like I'd been drowning. The woman's beautiful face contorted into a mask of rage, her features seeming to shift, to become sharper, wilder. A low, guttural growl rumbled from her throat, a sound that belonged in a barn, not a human mouth. I ran. I didn't look back. I ran until my lungs were on fire and the rain had soaked me to the bone, bursting out of the tree line and stumbling onto the gravel road that led into town. I collapsed on old Sheriff Miller's porch, babbling about Leo and a woman with a tail. The search party lasted for 2 weeks. They found nothing. No footprints in the mud, no torn clothing, no sign of a struggle. Just endless, silent woods. Most people thought I'd gotten confused in the storm, that Leo had fallen and hit his head in a ravine somewhere. They were kind, but their eyes held pity. They thought the grief had made me see things. But Old Man Henderson knew. He found me sitting on the dock after the official search was called off. He didn't offer empty comforts. He just sat next to me, the lake perfectly reflecting the gloomy sky. "They used to tell stories," he said, his voice a dry rasp. "My granddaddy, he came over from the old country, Norway. He said they brought things with them in the holds of those ships, not just trunks and tools, stories, beliefs. He said the deep woods here, they reminded them of home, felt right for the things they left behind." He told me then about the Hulder, a forest spirit, a woman of devastating beauty who would lure men deep into the wilderness with the sound of her voice or her fiddle. She'd make them forget their homes, their families, their very lives. But if you looked closely, you'd see the hollow in her back like rotten bark where she was empty inside. Or you'd see the tail she tried to hide. Those who followed her were never seen again, or they'd return years later, mad and broken, forever longing for the woods. The old-timers, Henderson said, squinting out at the water, they called this whole area Hulder's Hollow. Said the first settlers who tried to log it, they just vanished, left their breakfasts on the table and walked right into the trees like they'd heard a call they couldn't ignore. I left Silvertarn the next day. I couldn't stand the sight of the trees, but I never forgot. I went to college, I got a job, I tried to move on, but the forest called to me in my dreams, not with a beautiful woman's voice, but with my brother's. "Sam, it's so quiet here, Sam. Why did you leave me?" "Last month I went back, I had to. The pull was too strong. The town was quieter, older. Sheriff Miller had retired. Old Man Henderson was gone. The new people in town didn't know the stories. They just saw the beautiful wilderness. I went to the hollow. The trail was overgrown, but I found the clearing. The air was just as hushed, just as watchful. I stood there for an hour, calling his name, my voice swallowed by the trees. Nothing. As I turned to leave, defeated, I saw it, carved into the bark of one of the giant cedars, the same two Leo and I used to carve our initials into every year. But these weren't our initials. It was a crude, frantic etching, done with a rock or a knife point. It was a phrase over and over again, a desperate mantra scratched into the wood. I can still hear the music, and from deep within the forest, carried on a wind that shouldn't have been able to penetrate that still air, I heard it too. The faint, distant, and beautiful sound of a fiddle playing. It was a lure, a siren song for lost souls. And I knew with a certainty that froze the blood in my veins that my brother was still in there. Not dead, not alive, just waiting. And the Hulder was getting hungry again. This was just the first whisper from the woods of Silvertarn. The old evils there are just waking up. If you want to hear what else is waiting in the shadows, make sure you're subscribed. Your support tells me you want to hear more of the terror. Story 2. The weight of a whisper. You never think about the weight of a sound until it's the only thing you can hear. For me, it started with a whisper, a voice so small and desperate, it was less a sound and more a feeling, a pressure right against my eardrum. Too heavy. It would sigh right as I was drifting off to sleep. I'd jolt awake, my heart hammering, convinced a child was hiding under my bed. But there was never anyone there. Just that awful, crushing weight of a whisper. My name is Ben. I'm a long-haul trucker, or at least I was. I used to run the I-5 corridor from Seattle down to Portland and back, a route that skirts the edge of the vast Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. My life was the rumble of my engine, the white lines on the highway, and the quiet hum of my CB radio. It was a solitary life, but it was mine. I liked the solitude. Until the solitude started talking back. It began after a stop in Silvertarn. I'd blown a tire on a nasty patch of potholes just outside the town limits and had to limp the rig in. The place gave me a weird vibe from the get-go. It was too quiet, like the whole town was holding its breath. The mechanic, a kid who couldn't have been more than 20, had hands that shook the whole time he worked. He wouldn't look me in the eye. When I tried to make small talk asking if business was good, he just shook his head and muttered, "The woods are hungry this year." I wrote it off as small-town weirdness and got back on the road as soon as the new tires were on. That night, parked at a rest stop 50 miles south, I heard the first whisper. Too heavy. I sat bolt upright in my sleeper berth, the darkness absolute. I fumbled for my flashlight, shining it into the corners of the cab. Nothing. I told myself it was just the wind, a trick of the mind after a long day. But it came back, night after night. That same pathetic, breathy little voice. Too heavy. Carry me. It started to wear on me. I was jumpy, tired. I started making mistakes on the road, missing exits I'd driven 100 times. The whisper began to bleed into my waking hours. I'd hear it under the drone of my engine. A faint, desperate plea just on the edge of hearing. Please. So heavy. I started digging. I've got friends on the CB, guys who've driven every inch of asphalt in the Northwest. I asked about Silvertarn, about the woods around it. Most guys just clammed up. But one old-timer, Handle Wyatt Earp, came back to me, his voice crackling with static. Silvertarn, he said. That's bad news, son. Place has a history. Back in the day when the logging was big, a lot of accidents happened in those woods. Men crushed by trees, buried in mudslides. Bad business. They say some of them never left. He told me a story he'd heard from his own grandfather, a Swedish immigrant. The old man talked about the Myling, the ghosts of murdered children, or those who'd been left to die unbaptized in the wilds. They were said to appear to travelers on lonely roads, but you couldn't see them. You could only hear their whispers. They'd plead to be carried to hallowed ground so they could finally rest, but they were deceptively heavy. Their spiritual weight was immense, the weight of a life cut short and a soul in torment. They'd force you to carry them, and they wouldn't let you stop. They'd whisper and cry until you literally ran yourself to death, your heart giving out from the impossible burden, and then they'd just find someone else to carry them. I laughed it off. A ghost story. I was a rational man. I drove an 18-wheeler for God's sake. But that night the whisper was different. It was clearer. It was a little boy's voice, choked with tears. My name is Elias. The tree fell. I'm lost. Carry me home? Please, mister. I'm so heavy. I didn't sleep. I drove through the night, the radio blasting, trying to drown it out. But it was inside the cab, inside my head. I started seeing things in my rearview mirror. Not a shape, but a distortion, a patch of darkness in the sleeper berth that seemed denser than it should be. And the cab itself felt heavier. The engine strained on hills it used to take easily. The suspension groaned. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday night. I was on a dark, forested stretch of highway, the wipers slapping back and forth. The whisper was constant now, a sobbing, desperate litany. Carry me, carry me, carry me, too heavy, please. The steering wheel began to pull in my hands. It was a gentle tug at first, then a firm, insistent pressure, turning the wheel toward a narrow, abandoned forestry road on the right. I fought it, my muscles straining. No, I grunted, sweat beading on my forehead. The pull became violent. The wheel jerked hard to the right. My tires hit the muddy gravel of the side road and I lost control. I slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The rig skidded, the trailer fishtailing, and I came to a shuddering stop, completely off the highway, pointed down a dark tunnel of trees. The engine died. The silence was immediate and utterly terrifying. The only sound was the patter of rain on the roof, and then the whisper, right in my ear, cold and clear. We're close, carry me. The weight descended on me. It wasn't on my back, it was in me. A crushing, suffocating pressure on my chest, on my soul. I couldn't breathe. I gasped, clawing at my collar. I felt an unbearable grief, a loneliness so profound it hollowed me out. I saw flashes behind my eyes, the green gloom of the forest, the terrifying shadow of a falling pine tree, the feeling of being trapped and alone and so cold. I don't know how I got out of the cab. I just found myself standing in the mud and the rain, and I was running, not away. I was running down that dark forestry road, my boots slipping in the muck. I had to take him home. I had to ease the weight. Branches whipped at my face, but I didn't feel them. My lungs burned. My legs screamed in protest, but I couldn't stop. The whisper was a constant drive, a nail hammered into my brain. Faster, faster. He's waiting. I burst into a clearing. In the center, illuminated by a single shard of moonlight breaking through the clouds, was the massive moss-covered stump of a cedar tree that must have been a giant. It was split down the middle, blackened and rotten inside. This was the place. I knew it. I collapsed to my knees before it, my body broken, my breath coming in ragged, sobbing gasps. The weight was immense, pinning me to the ground. I was going to die here. My heart was going to burst. "I'm here," I cried out into the darkness, my voice raw. "I brought you, now leave me alone." The whisper stopped. The pressure vanished. For one blessed second, there was only the sound of the rain and my own desperate panting. Relief, sweet and cool, washed over me. It was over. And then I heard it. Not a whisper, a voice, small but clear, and right behind me. "Thank you." I turned my head. There, standing by the rotten stump, was a little boy. He was pale, almost translucent, wearing old-fashioned denim overalls. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the stump, his face a mask of sadness. Then he turned his head and his eyes met mine. They were old eyes, ancient and empty. "But I'm still so heavy," he said. And he took a step toward me. I ran. I left everything, my rig, my cargo, my life, in that clearing. I ran until I found a farmhouse, and I called the police from their landline. They found my truck, but they found no little boy. No footprints but my own. They think I had a mental break, brought on by stress and isolation. They might be right. I don't drive anymore, I can't. I live in a small apartment in the city, where the lights are always on and the noise never stops. But sometimes, in the dead of night, when the city is finally quiet, I hear it. Faint, like it's coming from the apartment below or the street outside. A tiny, breathy whisper. Too heavy. It's waiting. It knows it found me once. And the woods around Silvertarn are always there, waiting for the next lonely traveler to stop for a tire change, to hear a story, to pick up a weight they can never put down. The forest remembers every loss, every tragedy, and it's always looking to share the burden. If you're brave enough to hear the final story from Silvertarn, the one that ties it all together, make sure you're subscribed. Story 3. The Thing in the Trees. They say you can't truly remember pain. I'm here to tell you that's a lie. I remember the exact feeling of every splinter driving into my skin as I clawed my way up that tree. I remember the burn of the rope around my ankle. I remember the cold, wet breath of the thing that hunted me. Some memories don't fade. They carve themselves into your bones. My name is David, and I was a search and rescue volunteer. Silvertarn was my town. I'd lived there my whole life. I knew those woods better than I knew the lines on my own face. I'd helped find lost hikers, scared kids who'd wandered off from camp, even a few Alzheimer's patients from the care home in the next county over. I loved the woods. I respected them. I never thought they'd turn on me. It started with the Peterson kid. 8 years old, disappeared from his backyard. The parents were frantic. We mounted a full-scale search. Every volunteer, the sheriff's department, K9 units. We combed the area for 2 days. Nothing. On the third morning, we found him. He was curled up in the hollow of a large spruce tree, less than a half mile from his house. He was alive, but he was catatonic. He wouldn't speak, wouldn't respond. He just stared ahead with wide, terrified eyes, and his small hands were scraped raw, caked with dirt and sap, as if he'd been trying to climb something. The doctors called it severe shock. The town called it a miracle. But I saw the look old Mrs. Gunderson gave me when they carried the boy out on a stretcher. Her family had been in Silvertarn since the beginning. She just shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin white line. "The Nattmara is riding him," she whispered, too low for anyone else to hear. I asked her what that meant. She just turned and walked away. A week later, it was a young couple, campers who'd pitched a tent near Hulder's Hollow. They were found wandering on the road at dawn, shivering and incoherent. They babbled about a dark horse that had circled their tent all night, breathing heavily, pressing against the nylon walls, trying to get in. They said it had a woman's sad eyes. They'd finally fled in a blind panic, leaving everything behind. Then the calls started coming in. Not about missing people, but about nightmares. All over town, people were reporting the same dream. A feeling of immense pressure on their chests, a suffocating weight, and the image of a gaunt, shadowy horse with eyes that held a terrible, intelligent malice. People were waking up with scratches on their arms, bruises on their chests, exhausted as if they hadn't slept at all. The town was drowning in a shared terror, a fatigue that seeped into the very foundations of our homes. I did what any modern person would do. I went online. I dug through digital archives, old folklore forums. I found it in a scanned copy of a Danish immigrant's journal, the Nattmara. It wasn't a ghost or a spirit in the usual sense. It was a parasite of fear, a creature born from anguish and despair that could cross over from the dream world into ours. It didn't just give you nightmares. It physically visited you at night, sitting on your chest, stealing your breath, feeding on your terror. And the more afraid a community was, the stronger it became. It could take on a semi-corporeal form, often that of a monstrous horse or a shadowy woman. It was a predator that hunted from the inside out, turning your own mind against you. Silvertarn was a buffet. The fear from the missing people, the strange accidents, the whispers in the woods, it had all been fertilizing the ground for something like this. The Nattmara was feeding, and it was getting fat. It came for me on a night when the air was so thick with dread you could taste it, coppery and sharp, on your tongue. I'd gone to bed exhausted, my body aching from another day of fruitless searching for a missing forestry worker. The dream seized me instantly. I was in my own bedroom, but everything was wrong. The walls were breathing, pulsing like a living throat, and standing at the foot of my bed was a horse. It was made of shifting darkness and matted, coarse hair. Its ribs stood out against its skin, and its head was too long, too narrow. And its eyes, God, its eyes were a deep liquid brown, and they held a sorrow so profound it felt like a physical blow. But beneath the sorrow was a bottomless, hungry malice. It took a step forward, its hoof making no sound on the floorboards. The pressure began on my chest, gentle at first, then increasing until I couldn't draw a breath. I was awake. I knew I was awake. I could see my alarm clock, the moonlight through my window, but I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I was paralyzed, forced to stare into those terrible, sad eyes as the weight crushed me. I felt its cold, damp muzzle press against my neck, sniffing me. It was tasting my fear. This was how I was going to die. Not in the woods doing my job, but in my own bed, suffocated by a nightmare. No. The thought was a tiny spark in the overwhelming terror. This was a thing, a creature. It could be fought. With a Herculean effort that tore something in my mind, I jerked my hand just an inch. My fingers brushed against the lamp on my bedside table. The Nattmara's head snapped up, its eyes flashing with anger. The pressure intensified. Spots danced in my vision. I focused every ounce of my will, every bit of strength I had left, and shoved my arm outward. The lamp crashed to the floor, the bulb popped, a tiny, pathetic explosion of light and sound. The weight vanished. I sucked in a ragged, burning breath, rolling off the bed and onto the floor. The room was empty. But it wasn't over. I could feel it, a presence, a cold spot in the air moving toward my window. The window was closed, but the thing passed through it like smoke, and I saw it outside for just a second. A patch of deeper darkness flowing across my lawn and into the woods. It was real. It was tangible. And it was running. I didn't think. I grabbed my boots, my heavy jacket, and a hunting knife, and I ran after it. This was my town. These were my people. It was feeding on them, on me. It had to be stopped. I crashed into the woods, following a feeling more than a sight, a sense of cold dread, of wrongness moving through the trees ahead of me. It was leading me on a chase deeper and deeper, back toward the one place in these woods I'd always avoided, Hulder's Hollow. I burst into the clearing. The moon was high, casting a sickly silver light, and there it was, the Nattmara. It was no longer a horse. It was a shifting, man-shaped mass of shadow and anguish, with only those same sad, malicious eyes to anchor it to a form. It stood between two trees, and from it, I heard a chorus of whispers. Leo's voice begging for help, the Myling child crying that it was too heavy, the Peterson kid screaming. It was feeding on all of them, using their pain as a weapon. It lunged for me. It wasn't a physical attack. It was a wave of pure, concentrated nightmare. Images of my own deepest fears flashed in my mind. My family dead, my friends lost in the woods, me alone forever. The pressure returned to my chest 1,000 times worse. I fell to my knees, dropping the knife, my hands clawing at my throat. It was winning. It was going to drink me dry and leave me an empty husk. But as I knelt there, dying, my hand landed on something in the moss. It was cold and metallic. My fingers closed around it, Leo's Swiss Army knife, the one his brother had told me about. A different image flashed in my mind. Not a fear, but a memory. A story my own grandfather told me. The oldest magic there is. Naming a thing, defining it, taking its power by refusing to fear its true form. I looked up at the shifting, screaming horror in front of me, and I poured every last bit of my will into my voice. "I see you," I screamed, my voice tearing from my raw throat. "You are not my fear. You are not my nightmare. You are a Nattmara, a parasite, a shadow. You have no power here." The thing recoiled as if I'd struck it. The psychic assault faltered. The whispers stuttered. For a split second, its form solidified, and I saw it for what it truly was. A pathetic, withered, starved thing, a leech made of smoke and sorrow. It shrieked, a sound that came from no human throat, and fled, dissolving into the trees, leaving behind only a smell of ozone and rotten leaves. I passed out there in the clearing. They found me the next morning, half frozen, babbling. No one believed me, of course. They said I'd had a psychotic break from the stress, but the nightmares in Silvertarn, they stopped. The Peterson kids started talking again a week later. The couple who saw the dark horse moved away, but they say they sleep just fine now. The weight is gone. I moved away too. I had to. I still have the nightmares sometimes. Not of the Nattmara, but of those eyes. And I know deep down that I didn't kill it. I just wounded it. I drove it deeper into the dark places it came from. I gave it a name, and for now, that's enough to hold it back. But the woods around Silvertarn are very old and very patient. The soil remembers. The shadows are hungry. And a thing that feeds on fear will always find a new town, a new mind, a new nightmare to call home. It's just waiting for us to forget its name. Thank you for listening to the tragedies of Silvertarn. Remember, the world is older and stranger than we know, and some stories are warnings. If these tales sent a chill down your spine, let me know by liking this video and subscribing for more journeys into the unknown. Until next time, sleep well, if you can.